Frank Beard spent nearly 6 decades behind a drum kit building one of rock's most recognizable rhythms, and by the time he died on August 17 at the age of 77, that career had also built him a fortune estimated at $50 million, a figure worth understanding alongside the fuller story of who he actually was, on and off the stage. Frank Beard was born on June 11, 1949 in Frankston, Texas to Nico and Max Beard and grew up in nearby Irving where he attended and graduated from Irving High School. As of August 2026 he would have been 77 years old, born under the zodiac sign Gemini. His path into music started early and moved through a surprising number of bands before ZZ Top ever entered the picture. As a teenager, he met bassist Dusty Hill after their respective bands played together at a club in Fort Worth, and Hill invited him to join a group called the Warlocks. From there, Beard and Hill bounced through a string of Dallas area bands together, including the Cellar Dwellers, the Hustlers, and American Blues, along with a stint in an unauthorized touring imitation of the British band the Zombies, a group that toured the US without the consent of the actual Zombies members. In May 1969, Beard joined a band called the Moving Sidewalks, led by guitarist Billy Gibbons, which would be renamed ZZ Top just 2 months later in July 1969. It was Beard himself who introduced Gibbons to Hill, effectively assembling the classic lineup that would go on to define the band for the next 50-plus years. Beard replaced ZZ Top's original drummer, Dan Mitchell, and was credited under the nickname Rube Beard on the band's earliest albums, including 1973's Tres Hombres, the record that gave the trio its first real commercial breakthrough. From there, the band's rise was steady and eventually massive, moving through the blues-rock grit of their 1970s catalog into full-blown MTV-era stardom by the early 1980s, powered by hit records like Eliminator and Afterburner. Financially, that trajectory paid off enormously over time. According to Celebrity Net Worth, Beard's estimated $50 million fortune was built almost entirely through his decades with ZZ Top. Touring revenue, album sales, songwriting, and the ongoing commercial value of the band's catalog, which continued generating income well into his final years. That figure is an outside estimate rather than a publicly documented accounting of his actual assets, but it reflects the scale of financial success that came with being part of one of the longest-running, most consistent lineups in rock history, a trio that famously stayed together, unchanged, for more than 5 decades. Away from the stage, Beard lived a relatively private, grounded life, especially by rock star standards. He owned and operated the Top 40 Ranch in Richmond, Texas, southwest of Houston, a property that included a large home with ample living space reflecting the financial security his career provided. It served as his home for years and ultimately the place where he spent his final days surrounded by family. He was known locally for his interest in golf, regularly participating in tournaments and community events, a hobby that stood in fairly ordinary contrast to his decades of touring the world with one of rock's most recognizable acts. Friends and neighbors in the Richmond area reportedly knew him as an approachable, low-key presence rather than someone who leaned into rock star excess in his day-to-day life. His personal life included 2 marriages. Beard married his first wife, Catherine Alexander, in April 1978, and the two divorced in July 1981. He married his second wife, Debbie Meredith, in November 1982, and the couple went on to raise 3 children together, building a family life that largely stayed out of the public eye even as ZZ Top's fame grew internationally. Beard is survived by Meredith and their children. He'd also spoken candidly in the past about a difficult period following ZZ Top's breakthrough success in the late 1970s, during which he began spending heavily on drugs. He later expressed real regret over that period and entered a rehabilitation program to address it. A chapter of his life he wasn't shy about acknowledging as part of his broader, more complicated story, one that included both extraordinary professional success and personal struggles he had to work through privately. Professionally, Beard's health had become an increasing concern over the final 2 years of his life. In 2025, he stepped away from touring more than once to deal with health issues, with the band's longtime drum technician, John Douglas, filling in during those absences, marking a notable disruption to a band that had prided itself on lineup stability for decades. That pattern continued into 2026, and ZZ Top ultimately canceled its August 5th performance at the Hollywood Bowl, a decision widely understood to be tied directly to his declining condition. Following that cancellation, Beard's health continued to worsen until he entered hospice care at his Texas ranch, where he died just under 2 weeks later on August 17th with his family by his side. No official cause of death has been publicly disclosed, and reports have generally respected that privacy rather than speculating on specifics. Beard's musical legacy, though, extends well beyond any single figure tied to his wealth. His steady, precise shuffle became the driving foundation beneath some of ZZ Top's most enduring songs, tracks like Grange, Tush, Sharp Dressed Man, Legs, and Gimme All Your Lovin', songs that depended on his technique for their groove without ever making that contribution the headline of the band's image. Billy Gibbons, in his tribute following Beard's death, described him as one of the most naturally innovative drummers and a true son of Texas, crediting his signature backbeat with keeping the band at the top of its game for as long as it stayed there. Beard was also, notably, the only member of ZZ Top who never grew the long beard the band became visually famous for, a small but frequently noted detail that added its own bit of irony to a group whose very name referenced facial hair, and one that fans and interviewers brought up with him regularly over the decades. Beard and the band weathered real adversity together over the years, including a 2002 European tour stop, where Beard required an emergency appendectomy in Paris, forcing the band to perform without one of its classic lineup members for the first time in more than 3 decades, with Douglas again stepping in temporarily, much as he would over 2 decades later during Beard's final health struggles. That kind of resilience, both personal and professional, defined much of Beard's career, a steady presence who kept returning to the stage through health scares, lineup pressures, and decades of non-stop touring, right up until his body simply couldn't continue any further. Inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame alongside Gibbons and Dusty Hill in 2004, with Rolling Stones guitarist Keith Richards handling the induction, Beard leaves behind a career that helped shape one of American rock's most recognizable sounds. The band's catalog, built over more than 15 studio albums, sold more than 50 million records worldwide, with 6 singles reaching the top 10 of the charts during the band's commercial peak. Beard's contributions to that catalog weren't always the most visible part of ZZ Top's image, dominated as it was by Gibbons and Hill's matching beards and sunglasses, but musicians and drummers who studied his playing over the decades consistently pointed to his technical precision as one of the band's true secret weapons. His death came just over 5 years after the band lost bassist Dusty Hill, who died in his sleep at his Houston home in July 2021 at age 72. Rather than end the group, Gibbons chose to continue, bringing in longtime guitar tech Elwood Francis to take over on bass in a way meant to honor Hill's own wishes for the band to keep going. That decision meant Beard remained the last direct link to ZZ Top's original rhythm section for several more years, until his own health decline made that connection increasingly fragile. With his passing now confirmed, Gibbons stands alone as the sole surviving member of a lineup that stayed together, unchanged for more than 5 decades, a fortune, a legacy, and a body of work that all trace back to 3 musicians from Texas who decided in 1969 to start a blues band together and simply never stopped.